hard to schedule because she gave me like the craziest hours, and I'm like, I can't do any of those.
Yeah, I know. Well, hi, Erin. Welcome. Welcome to the show. It's great to have you back. It's been a while since we've like hit record on one of our conversations, but I'm
I
thrilled to
know.
have one of my besties and my super smart colleague that I can't believe is my friend also on the show.
I feel the same exact way, Holly. And I think one of our first episodes was during COVID. I have a vivid remember this moment of like us sitting down and us talking about running. You were on my podcast,
Yeah.
and that's where our friendship just continued to flourish. So I'm grateful to be here. Thanks for having me on. And what a great topic that I think a lot of people need more education around.
Yeah, I mean, I could have asked you, I mean, I ask you probably like 10 questions a day most of the time that are like professional related, but I could have asked you any questions for the podcast, but for probiotics, you are the person that definitely needs to cover this topic with me. Because gut health is your specialty. But yeah, I mean, if people are not familiar with you, which I tell them all that they should be, tell everyone who you are, what you do, and where you're located, just as a refresher.
Yeah, so I am a registered dietitian, just like Holly, and my specialty lays in the areas of small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, IBS, inflammatory bowel disease, clients who are dealing with chronic reflux, silent reflux as well. So really anybody dealing with any sort of GI stuff is where my passion is really rooted in. And I've been doing this for many years, but was really propelled to do it through my own journey with digestive issues most of my life. I'm outside of Boston. I'm in the suburbs. You know, we've got a family now, city living. We miss it, but not for us at this time. And I work with clients one-on-one in my practice from my home. And I do a lot of stuff in person in terms of like larger group type presentations. So thanks for having me today and super excited to chat about this.
I know, me too. Me too. And yeah, I mean, I learn so much from you all the time. So I'm excited for people just to learn from you as well as I pick your brain on this subject. And I was telling you before we hit record, like I could have asked, I mean, we could do like probably 2000 episodes on the topic of probiotics. So trying to cram it all into one is impossible, but my hope is to kind of put this in the form of my supplement myth busting series where we cover the basics of kind of like what is this thing
Mhm.
that is in supplement form in this case? What are the claims? Because there's claims, of course, behind most supplements that they're going to fix your entire life. And then also, like, are some of these claims valid, true? Like, who might these be a good idea for? Maybe who might these not be a good idea for? And some of the ins and outs of that that can give people maybe some light bulb moments if they're curious about probiotics. But yeah, I mean, just in terms of getting started, like what is a probiotic? Like what role do they play in our health?
Yeah. So probiotics, the actual definition for them is that they are live microorganisms. And when we take them, whether it's in a pill form or through dietary sources like fermented foods, that they are going to provide some benefit to the host. Um, we will obviously get into the nuances of the different types of probiotics and stuff like that, but I'm sure people are seeing the shelves being lined with that term probiotic, and we need to
Mm.
understand kind of what they are. But they serve a lot of different vital purposes within our entire whole health system. They help us to digest and break down food. They're very much involved with our immune system. They are very much involved with our, what we're seeing with associations of chronic disease. They are linked to our brain health, our heart health. So what we're continuing to find in the research, I feel like there's an article out every week of like gut health is linked to this and gut health is linked to that. And that's really coming down to the fact that these bacteria that live in our digestive tract and their genetics are playing such a vital role in all different aspects of our health, not just within the, the common symptoms like bloating or constipation. It's even far reaching than that in terms of how they're impacting our health.
Yeah, I know. It's so true. Whenever I talk about the gut microbiome or probiotics in general, I'm like, this topic is like the ocean. I'm like, we know a lot about it, but like stuff still gets lost in there. So we probably don't know everything about it.
Yeah.
Like it's just so vast. It's impossible to study like every single organism within billions, trillions like of bacteria in one single human. And then, yeah, try to apply it to like a larger population.
Mhm.
Um, with just to kind of stay on the topic of like what is, because I know people ask me this a lot too. We hear about
Mhm.
probiotics a lot of the times in the same context as like prebiotics and
Mhm.
synbiotics. What's the difference between those words?
Yeah. So a prebiotic is, I kind of describe it as like it's the food for the probiotics. So they're non-digestible carbohydrates that are going to provide fuel for those bacteria. You can find these in a lot of everyday foods that we eat. So artichokes, asparagus, oats, onions. These are all prebiotic rich foods, but then we can also find them in supplement form. And then synbiotic is pretty simple. It's just a prebiotic plus a probiotic. And that's that nice, beautiful combination that we can find in foods. Like, let's say you were to have probiotic rich yogurt plus oats or muesli, granola on top of that, you've got a symbiotic. Or in a supplement, you would see, the different strains of the bacteria plus inulin, for example, which would be a prebiotic. And then we have postbiotic, which is like basically now we're seeing that kind of come up a lot, which is
Yes.
referring to kind of like the byproduct of what happens when these, beneficial bacteria or probiotics do the good thing, which could be like short chain fatty acid production or, just increasing diversity of bacteria. So it's kind of the outcome of what that beneficial probiotic or prebiotic was supposed to do.
Yeah, yeah, and like we see a lot, I see a lot of supplements with those in them, and some of them are, can be useful too. That could be a whole
Sure.
podcast episode.
Hmm. Yep.
Um, in terms of like kind of sticking to probiotics for this one, I know if you are looking at like yogurt or fermented food, especially the ones where it's kind of like the probiotics are added like in, um, and you can turn around, look at the ingredients label. You can see like the species in italics, usually on the back. Or if you're looking at a supplement, it obviously will probably say what strains are on the back. What do you see like as the most common, like that people might see on the shelf or in food? And then we can start to maybe get into like how, yeah, different bacteria do and provide different things for us.
Sure. Yeah, the most common ones that you're going to see oftentimes are going to be like the lactobacillus strains. So lactobacillus rhamnosus or reuteri or maybe a few bifidobacterium as well that you would find in a yogurt. Not super common, but maybe one of each, maybe one lactobacillus and one bifidobacterium. Those are definitely the most common that you're going to see in something like a food product. And they do help with certain things. Like if they're in a dairy product, for example, they can help to break down the lactose. They can help to support the immune system. So it's pretty basic, and we'll talk about this too. Like we don't really know how much of that is actually in the food product, but we will know that it's there. But usually it would just be one or two strains that would be added to a food. If we're looking at shelf stable food, like food that is going to be more like dry goods. We're going to see a lot more spore-based probiotics being added. That's very common in the food space and teas, like certain teas, they're adding a lot of like
Yeah.
spore-based probiotics to that as well. You might see something like the Bacillus family, if you will. So you'll see those on the labels too. But traditionally, most of what we were seeing would just be the Lactobacillus bifido strains and what we mostly are going to be purchasing at the store.
Yeah. And the kind of like looking at the supplement side of things, especially
Mhm.
like that's where I think it gets a lot more varied in like what's offered. Like what is, I guess let's just talk about a little bit like why they're not all created equal. Like if you pick
Yeah.
one probiotic off the shelf, it might be completely different than another one off the shelf, even if they say they have the same things in them, because there's different species, different strains, different like CFU amounts. I guess what like why might these things all exist? Like, are there different uses for
Mhm.
different types of probiotics? And do you have a preference? And we can get maybe into the nuances of like what the preferences might be for in certain cases.
Yeah. I mean, so if you're looking for just like a basic daily gut support supplement, my preferred option would be something that is broad spectrum, so meaning it has a multiple different strains in it. So you're going to see, I usually tell clients look for at least 5 to 6 different strains of probiotics on the back of that label. So usually some of those are going to be again lactobacillus and bifido. Those are more common for the supplements that I would recommend clients take on a regular basis or consume on a regular basis. So, like Lactobacillus rhamnosus, for example, that one's really good for like diarrhea, really good for kids that have GI issues. Lactobacillus reuteri, that's another one. A lot of good research on that for kids, even babies with colic. Also good for oral health, things like H. pylori, which is quite common to have that bacteria, as you know. Lactobacillus plantarum, that one's really popular for specifically IBS. And then we get into like the bifido strains, which can be really beneficial for clients who have like bacterial overgrowth, who want like gut brain support, constipation. Both lactobacillus and bifido are really good for constipation. There's certain strains that are better in terms of the lactobacillus for diarrhea type, but certainly can be good for both of those different conditions. So those are kind of the strains we're going to look for more of like a daily probiotic. When we get more into like specific symptoms or conditions like inflammatory bowel disease, that's where we're going to be looking at things more like a yeast-based probiotic, which would be like the Saccharomyces boulardii. I don't know if you want to go into kind of talking about those yet.
Yeah. Yeah. People can at least know the difference if they're seeing that on a label.
Yeah. So those the lactobacillus strains, you have those. I like to think of them in like these kind of 4 categories. The lactobacillus bifido, then you have the yeast-based, the Saccharomyces boulardii, and then you've got spore-based or soil-based, and then kind of put Akkermansia as more of like a more targeted.
Hmm.
But that Saccharomyces boulardii is you'll typically see, am I allowed to talk about brands on here?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Okay, so Floristore, for example, is a very well-known, evidence-based, highly recommended doctor supplement, meaning like you go to your doctor, oh, I've got inflammatory bowel disease or, chronic diarrhea, they will often recommend Floristore, which is a strain of it's the S. boulardii yeast-based probiotics. That one's really good for diarrhea. I love it for H. pylori. I love it for increasing the gut's immune function or secretory IgA. That one's really fantastic. Also really good for parasites and Clostridium difficile, which is really common. And then spore-based is another category, which is a unique strain in that it can survive stomach acid, it can survive heat, it can survive very harsh environments. So we can kind of talk about the like survivability of probiotics if you want to dive into that anymore. But what's unique about that spore-based probiotic, it is very resistant to stomach acid and heat. So it does have the ability to make its way down into the lower intestine. And it also has some antimicrobial benefits, meaning it's a great choice for individuals who have a small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, which, they won't tolerate a lot of the strains of traditional probiotics, so that makes it a good choice for them. It's also really good for a leaky gut. Um, and then the last one, the Akkermansia, that one's very good for leaky gut. And we also have some good research on its influence on our metabolic function, on our brain health. There's still a lot of ongoing research there that, we still are seeing come out right now.
Yeah, getting into like the survivability aspect, because I think someone might have just heard like, oh, the spore one survived the stomach. They'd be like,
Yeah.
why wouldn't I only take a spore one? Can we
Yeah.
talk about like
Mhm.
why and when, I guess, surviving stomach acid might be important? And also even just like, I know people sometimes get really caught up in like, oh, it always needs to be one that's refrigerated or it's crap, you
Mhm.
know?
Yeah.
Like why do these different types exist and like are certain ones beneficial for certain things?
Yeah, so I'm sure people are familiar with certain brands who have used marketing techniques such as this is enterically coated to survive stomach acid, which makes our brand superior. What we know from research is that a probiotic does not have to actually survive stomach acid and for it to confer benefit to the host. So that's not necessary for it to make its way all the way into the lower intestine, which is where the majority of our microbiome is. However, there are certain strains that when they do that, it's for a reason. They do something really good down there. Like the spore-based probiotic is really good for that intestinal lining. So in a case of leaky gut, or in a case where someone's microbiome might be very depleted, that can actually help to improve those beneficial bacteria. Um, the Lactobacillus bifido strains, those don't survive stomach acid, or a lot of them don't. So they are actually producing a lot more benefit in the upper digestive tract. So they can actually produce a lot of benefit to the person taking them before they even get down to the lower digestive tract. So to say that it is absolutely necessary that they can survive stomach acid and they can make their way all the way down isn't true. And obviously we can see this just in food sources. Like, we don't
Right.
eat kimchi in a capsule. We don't
Right.
take probiotic in, an enterically coated capsule. These are foods that we know that the research shows that there's good evidence that they're providing benefit, and it's not due to the fact that they are surviving stomach acids. It's there's other things that can happen, and there's other byproducts that can be produced, or things that can be altered in the digestive tract before they go all the way down to the bottom, if you will. So no, it's not important that that is absolutely necessary for it to survive stomach acid. We just have to understand what we're targeting and why we're targeting it, and then obviously individual recommendations will be made.
Yeah, and do you know like the difference between like if something has to be refrigerated versus shelf stable, like
hmm
why? I guess
hmm
like kind of if someone's like, "Oh, is the shelf stable one even doing
hmm
anything? Does that make it lower quality?" I've heard that a lot
Yep.
too.
hmm Yeah, there's this big misconception that, and I used to think this when I was younger too, when I was in school, it'd
Same.
be like, ooh, that's a $60 probiotic. It's in the fridge. That's the fancy one, whereas the other one is not so good, which we now have technology to make probiotics very shelf stable. So there are certain strains that are now able to sit on the shelf and not lose, their benefit. So in general, these probiotics, when they are exposed to heat, light, any sort of harsh temperatures or environments, and if they're sitting out at room temperature, they're going to pretty quickly start losing the amount of live organisms that we're going to end up taking in that supplement. So when you put something on the shelf in a refrigerator, you are going to increase the life of that microorganism. So that's only true that that probiotic would be better if it is a strain that is very sensitive to heat, light, harsh environments. But again, because we now have the ability to make certain probiotics shelf stable, then that's not necessarily true. That you could just be paying more money for one that's in the fridge in this pretty little shelf when you don't actually have to. And a lot of the spore-based probiotics, what's so great about those is because they are so resistant to those harsh temperatures, you're going to see them in things like a peppermint tea, or you're going to see them in things like a of something that can sit out on a shelf, for example. So that is one of the benefits, and that's why you're seeing a lot of food companies add those to the probiotic, those types of probiotics to their items because they are very shelf stable.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, because I think maybe even like 10, 20 years ago, it could have been like, yeah, some things like probably in the fridge were a little bit higher potency, but now
Yeah.
there's a lot more technology and the spore-based ones are like meant to survive, yeah, like a nuclear
Yeah.
attack essentially. So,
Yes. So if you
got
follow,
some
like if you have a
durability.
probiotic at home, follow the instructions. If it says to keep it in the fridge, keep it in the fridge. If it doesn't say to keep it in the fridge and it says it's not necessary, then likely they have gone through that process to make it a shelf stable item. But you will be taking no benefit if your probiotic is supposed to be refrigerated and it's been sitting on the shelf for, months. It's just losing more and more of those beneficial bacteria.
Yeah, I've had like if I recommend a probiotic to clients and I know it's like a refrigerated one,
Mhm.
and it's coming in the mail, I'm like, all right, it's gonna come in with a nice pack. Like, if you aren't home, like it'll be okay, for
Yeah.
like a couple
Yes.
hours or even a day,
Oh, yeah.
but the
hmm
longer it sits out, the less potent it's going to be. So we try to have that conversation, but sometimes, yeah, mistakes happen.
Yeah, and that's a great point. Like how important is it? Like, is it absolutely everything's just gonna die within a few days? No, but just remember that you're not helping keep those beneficial bacteria alive the longer that that goes. So, And sometimes with these probiotics too, if you look at the color of them and they start to go from like white to like a kind of yellow, or they get kind of clumpy, and you like if you're looking at the capsule and it's looking kind of not fluid, if you will, it's kind of like clumpy inside if it's a powder.
Yeah.
That's often a sign that your probiotic's gone bad too. I've seen that as well
Mhm.
with clients, just like, oh, I took a picture of it. I'm like, yeah, you can kind of tell that that's not doing so hot. So
Yeah.
got a random
Yeah.
jar in the fridge or something and you're wondering if it's okay, you could also look at those types of things as well.
Yeah, and say like, is this going to do anything? Speaking of that, I mean, I'm going to read off some claims. We don't have to like
Hmm.
dive into each of these, but like there's so many claims with probiotics. Like they're going to heal your gut, they're going to reduce your GI symptoms, get rid of your diarrhea, get rid of your constipation, heal your bloating, heal your like chronic disease, whether it's IBD or like some other chronic disease like Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
Like there's so many claims, heal your skin, act as a GLP-1 replacement, boost your
Yeah.
immune function, improve mental health. Like the list is endless. So
Mhm.
maybe if we could even go into like a couple examples just so people can
Mhm.
take away some clinical pearls of like, oh, if I'm a person with this picture, maybe I look into this, or if I'm a person with this picture, maybe I don't take a probiotic.
Yeah.
Because some of these claims, obviously, like most supplements, are completely outlandish.
Mhm.
Like it's not going to be this magic pill that solves all of your problems, but they can be
Sure.
extremely impactful for the right person.
Mhm.
So to kind of start with like the broad question, like, do you think everyone needs a probiotic supplement?
No, definitely not. And there's even some people that actually it can make them feel worse.
Yeah. So let's talk about those people because I know they're probably listening to this podcast too. Like, well, I tried that and everything got worse. If that
Yeah, a lot.
happens, yeah, like
Yeah.
what should they be thinking about?
So a lot of the times if an individual takes a probiotic and it makes them feel worse, oftentimes they either maybe didn't need it and it was like, for example, the spore-based probiotics, they come in like hot and heavy. I'm gonna
Yeah.
start giving probiotics like personalities.
Yeah.
They come in like they're very strong and they do this thing called quorum sensing where they kind of like can sense the environment and kind of adjust based on that. So they might start doing things that don't need to be done. On the other side, sometimes when you take a probiotic, it is maybe having those antimicrobial effects that I mentioned. So they could be killing off bacteria or killing off yeast. And that can be a die-off reaction where there's
Yeah.
actually a good thing happening, but your body is experiencing negative symptoms because of, kind of that die-off reaction. And that can cause maybe some worse GI symptoms, some worse bloating. Sometimes there's just an adjustment period where, it can take, 2 weeks for things to kind of balance out and your body's just getting used to it. And then there's cases of like small intestinal bacterial overgrowth where you're taking certain strains that are actually kind of providing more fuel to the fire in that sense of the bacterial overgrowth, where it's making your symptoms a lot worse because that's not the right strain for what's going on in your gut.
Mhm.
So definitely some different scenarios, and oftentimes it's pretty easy for me to like say, "Oh yeah, I would have known that you wouldn't have tolerated that." But
Yeah.
like of my really sensitive clients, for example, like throwing a spore-based probiotic at them, especially at like a higher dose, you always want to start very slow with spore-based probiotics. But my very, very sensitive clients, spore-based probiotics are going to often be a little too intense for them. So we will often steer away and go for something a little bit more gentle. But that's why, you could literally just go out there, buy these four different kinds or three different kinds and do trial and error on yourself. Because sometimes with probiotics, it really is trial and error. But as you and
Yeah.
I know, there's also testing we can do to kind of personalize it a little bit better, knowing that nothing is ever going to be a perfect test to prescribe a probiotic. But we know that certain strains are better for specific things.
Yeah, I know. I always describe like if, I'm suspecting overgrowth somewhere, like with someone, and they're like, yeah, if I eat probiotic rich foods or I took a probiotic and it made everything so much worse for a couple,
Mhm.
usually they don't last a couple weeks because they're like, I feel worse than I already felt. So I'm
Right.
stopping this now.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
but I'm like, yeah, you kind of like invited all the frat guys with a keg to the existing party. Like that
Yeah.
just, made things more
It's so
rowdy in
crazy
there.
now. Yeah.
Yeah, and like we needed to call like the police instead.
And
Um,
I'm working with a lot of clients now with like histamine issues, mast cell
yeah,
activation. And so there are also a lot of strains that can exacerbate histamine issues and could even be histamine producing bacteria. So we do have to also be careful with those clients as well. I think that's an important point to mention.
that's interesting. Yeah. I mean, let's talk a little bit about the testing because I
Mhm.
know this is something that, like, again, you can buy, yeah, a bunch of different types of probiotics if you have unlimited funds and time and energy and like kind of do science experiments on yourself. But sometimes the testing can be really, really helpful because the other thing I think we'll be getting at probably a lot is if you take a probiotic and it helps you or it hurts you or whatever it is, like we still kind of want to understand like why was the environment like that in the first
Right.
place?
Sure.
And I think that's what some of the testing that we're going to get into a little bit can uncover a little bit more.
Sure.
So yeah,
Mhm.
talk about like some different avenues you go with clients depending on obviously their unique situation. And then we can talk about what these tests show and
Mhm.
why that might be helpful in like assessing what types of interventions are helpful.
Yeah. Oftentimes what we see on stool testing, especially with the tests that, we use in practice are like the GI map, for example. It's a PCR DNA, a stool analysis. A lot of what we're seeing is we look at patterns and trends, right? So it's
Yeah.
not like people think that, oh, like this is high, let's make this low. This is low, let's make this high by taking this specific probiotic. And it's not that simple. It's
If
more like
only, if only
I
it
wish
were
it
that simple.
was.
Yeah.
It's like you are presenting with more of an inflammatory dysbiosis, meaning an imbalance of bacteria pattern. You have more of a deficiency dysbiosis, meaning low levels of beneficial bacteria. You are looking at more like an overgrowth pattern. So, in each of those cases, like if it's more inflammatory, we might even skip the probiotic altogether. That's probably more just, focusing on anti-inflammatory herbs, looking at our diet, our lifestyle, stress. If there's deficiency, dysbiosis, that's when we might look at a spore-based probiotic, knowing that spore-based probiotics are much more helpful at colonizing the gut and improving those beneficial bacteria. And then in a case of like overgrowth, we might also use spore-based. If the overgrowth is more like in H. pylori, we might go for the S. boulardii, for example. S. boulardii does tend to cause constipation in a lot of clients that I've used it with. So I am very careful. If a client has more diarrhea type, it's much quicker to go for that one. But we use the testing to look at patterns, to look at trends, to zoom out and say, what does this environment look like? Exactly what you mentioned. And if that environment is, trending towards a certain direction, we've been doing these for years now. It's pretty easy to tell now kind of what's going on from a root cause perspective in many of these cases and give them these more personalized recommendations.
Yeah, and sometimes it's like, okay, there's several root causes, and like some of these things we can't change because it's genetic, it's environment, it's how
Sure.
your life is right now, and we can't change it. And like we
Yep.
kind of have to play, yeah, like symptom whack-a-mole, try to get the things we can control better. And that's where these might be useful tools or not, depending on the situation. And then other times it's like, oh, you got a virus and now we have some post-viral stuff going on, or
Yeah.
you had to take antibiotics because you got this random infection from this
Hmm.
random acute thing. And now we have like this issue because your gut just never recovered. Um, and it's interesting because, yeah, like not everyone has the same reaction to like those stimulus. So, looking
Yeah,
at the
and people
test,
are often shocked to find like that
yeah.
probiotics are not usually the first thing I recommend. They're like at the end of our meetings, sometimes they're like, "And would you recommend a probiotic?" And I'm like, "No." Like there are certain cases where they're important, but there's so many other things that we often will do before a probiotic is even part of that protocol. Um, in a lot of cases. And I'm someone who has my own probiotic line. So trust me,
Yeah.
like I'm happy to recommend them when it's necessary, but there's a lot of times when probiotics are not the first thing that we do. And sometimes they're the last thing that we do as a way to kind of rebuild, support. But yeah, it just depends on the person.
Yeah. The other question too I had kind of on that same line because you're an ethical practitioner, even though you have your own supplement line. So you're not just like, everyone needs this. Here's my discount code or whatever.
Mhm.
Um, is a lot of people are seeing on social media, like influencers recommending certain brands. We've been reached out to by these brands too, I'm sure, to
Mhm.
collaborate.
Yep.
And it's like, hey, take this forever. Do you see like from a research perspective, especially for like the person who's like, I just want to improve my gut health. There's not a lot going on, but like, I just want to be healthy. Is there benefit to taking things like super long term? Because I know a lot of the times how we're using things tends to be maybe more temporary or targeted with certain people with certain symptoms.
So some of this will admittedly be theory based and just what I've seen in practice and also my personal experience. And there's some theories that other people like doctors have, that there's concerns with taking something every single day that could develop resistance to. We don't have research
Yeah.
that proves that for sure. But like you mentioned in the beginning, like with microbiome research, there's so many question marks and so much that we don't know and that we might not ever know because it's really difficult to completely copy and paste that environment in every individual's gut and what's going on in there. But
Yeah.
long term, I see benefits in terms of cases where clients have had a very long history of antibiotic use. They are highly stressed, overworking individuals who are really just struggling to support their gut through lifestyle and diet. And so, it's kind of like if you're someone who doesn't eat a lot of iron-rich foods and, taking an iron supplement would benefit you because you're not really able to do the things that you could do to support that. So there's certain cases where long-term supplementation, from what we understand, no, it's not seemingly harmful based on the evidence that we have. There's no reason to show that it would be unsafe to take these probiotics. Most of the case where I would ever recommend long-term would be those strains that I mentioned of the Lactobacillus and Bifidobacterium. It's
Right.
like saying you shouldn't eat yogurt every day for the rest of your life. Like it's kind of similar because those strains are so benign. They're not, like the soil base, for example. That one I don't really ever have clients take long term. There's not ever usually a need for that to be a long term. But taking a daily probiotic is something that I do. Again, history of long antibiotic use, definitely more prone to H. pylori reoccurrence. Like there's certain things that I know, and I don't do a ton of probiotic rich foods throughout the week. I try to do fermented foods and things like that, but I know that I'm not getting as much as I should be getting in my diet.
Mm.
So no concerns long term in certain populations, maybe, if they're immune compromised, we might want to reconsider things like that. If they are, getting to a place where we are starting to see symptoms change, obviously we want to reevaluate that. But, doing like a broad spectrum daily probiotic or a single strain Lactobacillus bifido, I don't see any concerns with doing that long term.
Yeah, and it's like it might not be benefiting certain people that much,
Right.
but like it
Hmm.
also may not be hurting.
Right. It's just like
Obviously don't
hurting
take
your wallet.
something, yeah, like don't take something long term if you're like, this makes me feel awful, but they said it was
Right. Yeah.
but like, yeah, I think for a lot of people that I talk to who maybe have some GI issues that are very like they're not like a huge concern to them, or it's very occasional, or they feel fine, they just want to be healthy.
Hmm.
They tell me like, oh, I take a probiotic. I don't really know if it makes a difference. Like, I don't really feel any different. And I feel like for those people, it's kind of like, well, it might be helping you a little bit, but it also might not be doing much. Like, like
Yeah.
you
If a
might just
client
have
said
a
that, I would tell
healthy,
them to stop. I would be
yeah,
like, stop for a period of time.
and see what you think.
Make that be like the main thing that you change. And if you don't feel like it does anything different, I mean, sometimes it's hard because like probiotics, like we talk about like the mood benefits, the immune benefits, there might be cases where like it is helping you on a like micro level, but you're not
Right.
necessarily seeing it daily in bowel movements. But I will tell clients always with honestly any supplement, but especially probiotics, is if you've been on it for a while, you don't really feel like it started helping you at any point, yeah, you should stop taking it and give it like a few weeks and see if you can stay off of it because I'm always trying to like peel
Decrease.
away the list of supplements and say, can we reduce that list of things that you have to take on a daily basis? Financially, that makes sense. And then also, again, like if you're taking something you don't really feel like it's helping, A plus B equals.
Preach. You can just stop.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And to kind of get into like some more clinical pearls, like I know I've got a couple bullets here that just like I thought of thinking of like different types of cases that I work with really often in the endurance
Yeah.
population. I know you work with a
Hmm.
lot of endurance athletes too, not exclusively, but quite a few.
Hmm.
Um, like there's a couple like yeah, like people, conditions, pictures where it's like yeah, usually this strain might be a good idea for you. I know we talked about SIBO and how maybe nothing is a good idea or spore-based later. Um,
Hmm.
that could be one example. If you had to give like three or four more, like if you want to just
Hmm.
spitball some clinical pearl
Yeah.
knowledge for our listeners.
So S. boulardii would be my top choice for H. pylori, loose stools. Definitely high dose S. boulardii. The dose is important for like inflammatory bowel disease or chronic diarrhea or C. diff. The dose of the S. boulardii should really be higher than just like a daily 5 billion, for example.
Mhm.
Um, for constipation, I really like the lactobacillus strains. Like definitely the lactobacillus bifido blends are some of the best for chronic constipation. Um, let's see what else. So constipation, diarrhea for SIBO, we talked about the spore base definitely, and for leaky gut, oftentimes we'll also use the spore based. That one is definitely really good for building that beneficial bacteria that help to support that mucosal lining.
What
Uh,
about if someone's like, I had to take antibiotics and I know probiotics might
yeah.
be a good idea. What about
Mhm.
that person?
So I really like I actually this is something I've kind of switched over the years is I actually do the soil-based probiotics post antibiotic for a lot of people or the Saccharomyces boulardii. So those ones I find to be much more beneficial than just the Lactobacillus bifido strains. So I will typically recommend those for at least 4 weeks post antibiotic, and I'll usually recommend the S. boulardii for the course of when you're also doing the antibiotic as well. I just recommend, 2 to 3 hours away from when you're taking the antibiotic.
And is that typically like just to kind of get into the why, like the
Mhm.
because the physiology of your gut changes when you take an antibiotic? Are you more prone to certain things like with certain
Mhm.
antibiotics? Why those specific strains?
So they're still going to help to support the beneficial bacteria, even though they're getting a hit from the antibiotic. So that's the main reason for it. And as we know, like the lactobacillus strains, those are not going to be staying in your guts. They're not actually going to increase the beneficial bacteria. So the S. boulardii and the soil-based are because of their resistance and their, ability to survive harsh conditions. Those actually can create more of that increase in those beneficial bacteria that are being lowered, as we know, when we're taking the antibiotics.
Yeah, and like preventing like yeast overgrowth and stuff like
Yeah,
that things.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. The candida post antibiotic, I see that all the time. And then also, like you mentioned, like, our environment, we're more, we can see more hit to our gut's immune system. We can see issues with the gut lining. So we're kind of trying to get ahead of it and support there. The most research we have, like the most evidence-based, is the S. boulardii for antibiotic associated diarrhea. We're not talking
Mm.
like evidence-based from like a spore-based perspective. But the S. boulardii we do know is very well researched for antibiotic associated diarrhea.
Yeah, that makes sense. What
Hmm.
about and I promise I'm not just like asking about myself. What about pregnancy? Any specific
Yeah.
things for pregnancy?
Yeah, the Lactobacillus bifido strains are my favorite. Those have been shown to have really wonderful outcomes in terms of even things like metabolic function, things like gestational diabetes. There's not like a ton of research on the GBS. Like there's really not a good way that we have been shown to prevent that. I have a whole section in my gut pregnancy guide about this, but and there's even concerns about like, if we're trying to do these like little remedies to like reduce it, are we just temporarily reducing it for the test and then it's still positive? So you have to be careful
Right.
with that too. But certainly like a daily lactobacillus bifido blend is great. And then if you go into pregnancy with like H. pylori reflux or, SIBO or something like that, these are pregnancy safe probiotics. None of these that I've listed are not probiotic. Sorry, are not pregnancy safe. Obviously, you need to speak with your provider and make sure
Mhm.
everything looks okay otherwise, but there's no contraindications for reasons for taking that. But definitely, you're not only supporting the health of yourself, your vaginal flora, your gut microbiome flora, you are also helping support your baby's microbiome and their future. So lots of great benefits there.
Yeah, yeah, and I know, yeah, and I've seen that pregnancy gut health guide. Go buy it. Everyone, it's quite good. Erin was like, "I'm so sorry. Do you want to just read this? Like, before I put it out, like, I don't want to take up your time." And I was like, "Do I want to read it? Absolutely, I want to read it. Like, this is gold." So yeah, we can tell everyone where to find all those things at the end. But also too, like, this is kind of like a duh question in my opinion, but like for specific things like acromantia, especially
Mhm.
like when might that be something you use? Because I think that's getting a lot of it's getting a lot more attention right now. I think for good reasons, and then also for maybe like not so great, claims around,
Yeah.
it replacing medication. But talk to us a
Mhm.
little bit about that particular strain.
Yeah, so I mean, I did a paid sponsorship for Pendulum, the first company that developed their Akkermansia supplement, and I'm a big fan. I use it a lot in practice. When we look at a GI map stool test result and there is a non-detectable amount of Akkermansia,
Yeah.
that's kind of our duh moment.
Yeah.
There are cases where, so this acromantia, it's being shown to support GLP-1. It's been shown to like maybe potentially influence insulin resistance, appetite regulation, mood. So when people see that, they're like, oh, I need all of those things. I want that. But there's also research that shows that individuals taking too much that don't actually need it, it could actually be harmful,
Yeah.
especially with like clients with PCOS, for example. So we have to be really careful about, if we don't have testing and we just kind of like the idea of the outcome, we have to remember that that outcome is based on usually populations that need it, that actually need
Um,
it. It's like if you were to, I keep coming back to iron, probably just because you're a sports dietitian. It's like if you are to take iron and you don't actually need it, it then actually produces
right.
harm. You're taking too much iron. So you
Yeah.
need to think of probiotics in that same sense of it is a dietary supplement. And if you don't need it, that could provide you with, unwanted complications.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's so true. And that's one too, where it's like we call it like a duh, because it is kind of like, yeah, if it's not showing up on the test as a
Mhm.
keystone species that should be there, then we
Sure.
we should probably do something about that. And there
Yeah.
is like a solution that is relatively newer, but it's probably more of like a short term like supplementation situation and like recheck to see if it's working
And
situation.
let me say this too, because this is so important that you can put Akkermansia into your gut all day long through a supplement. But
Yes.
if your gut environment is not optimized to support that bacteria's survival, it's useless. So I just planted my vegetables in my garden. The soil sucks, right? So there's a slim chance that these vegetables are actually going to grow. That's exactly how I want people to think of your gut environment is that if that soil is not rich and being supported through diet, lifestyle, all these other things, then those good beneficial bacteria don't have the tools they need to survive. So that's especially with Akkermansia that if you're taking an Akkermansia supplement, I see this all the time, and they're like, oh, that's weird. I was taking Akkermansia every single day and it's still low. Well, there's a lot of inflammation going on that's not allowing that Akkermansia to survive. So these are
Yeah.
situations where we really have to think about the gut as like the soil, and like what's going on in there, and is that a supportive environment for what we want to be there?
Yeah, that's a great point. And that's the case too with like so many supplement and like health
Hmm.
interventions. We could
Yeah.
go down a whole like soapbox rabbit hole of talking about people using things like the GI map kind of as like okay, let's just put together a protocol and that's all you have to do. But if it doesn't incorporate nutrition, lifestyle, kind of like changes that take into account the whole person and not just throwing a bunch of supplements at the wall, like you're
Yeah.
probably going to be back where you started. Um,
AKA me treating my H. pylori 3 times without addressing my stress levels.
yeah, I
And
know.
then what happened when I actually addressed my stress? The treatment was successful, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yes,
so,
that's a
we're not judging. We've been there to some degree. So,
absolutely. I told a client this week. I was like, and I've told you this before too. I've sent you GI maps, and I'm like, I look at the same avatar really often, client
Mhm.
wise. By the time we're getting to a GI map, like a lot of people are struggling with similar things. It's kind of like one of three pictures
Yep.
that I'm used to seeing. And it got to a point where I was like, does everyone just have H. pylori? Is this thing rigged? Like, Do I need to like look into the specificity of this or like approach how I'm looking at this differently? I did a test on myself. I did a test on like a friend of my husband's who's not a runner at all, who was having some issues, and it's like totally fine because their stress levels
Yeah.
are like not that of an endurance athlete, very different.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay. I'm like, I just have a niche. Got
Yeah.
it.
That's
Um,
so funny.
but it's so true. Like these tests are really, really like the specificity is really high. They're really sensitive.
Mhm.
Maybe that's the better word. The sensitivity is super high. So looking
Mhm.
at something positive or negative, it doesn't always mean we do something like specifically targeted towards that. Like you have to look
Right.
at the whole picture, including how the person is feeling.
Mhm.
Before you come up with approaches. And I think on the topic of probiotics, I just appreciate you diving into the nuances of everything because
Mhm.
it is, I think, in a lot of people's minds, it's like, oh, it's a simple, like, yes or no supplement question. But
Mhm.
it, as you can probably see from this episode, it really does depend um,
Yeah.
on so many factors. Is there
Yeah.
anything
Make
else you would
sure.
add?
Yeah, just make sure, there's a lot of marketing out there. Make sure that the company that you're purchasing from is doing third-party testing.
Yeah.
Make sure that you're not just blindly spending extra money for some of these claims that we've now broken down today. Don't maybe mean a whole lot, especially for certain conditions. And yeah, I mean, listen to your body. If you've been told this is the best probiotic for this and you don't feel better, then it's probably not a good fit for you. And maybe there's something you need to dig deeper into. But yeah, hopefully this episode is helpful for people. There's a lot of misinformation, but it's just like any dietary supplement out there. There is a business behind it for a lot of people, and that becomes very murky.
Yeah, yeah, super, super murky.
Yeah.
Clear as mud. No, thank you so much. And yeah, if people want to find you and use you as a resource, which I hope they do, after listening to like, I mean, 0.5% of your knowledge and what you have to offer, where can they find you?
Yeah, nutritionrewired.com. That's for everything. My social media, Nutrition Rewired, nutritionrewired.com has all my resources. And if you ever want to shoot me an email, it's Erin at nutritionrewired.com. Be happy to chat. And thanks for having me. It's been so great.
Of course. Thanks for coming back on the show.
Yeah, anytime, my friend. I can't wait to have you on soon. We'll have to keep this just, back and forth for the next 100 years.
Yeah, I thought of this idea like when you were giving birth, basically. And I was like, I'll give her a couple weeks before I reach out. I was like,
Yeah.
I will give her a few weeks because she's busy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate you making the time on your maternity leave comeback.
Oh, girl, you got it. Anytime. Happy to help.